Let's come to our next topic, which is filters in Java Enterprise. Here we will talk
Let's
about
come to our next
why
topic.
filters, what is a filter, and filters in servlets. So filters are used when there is a need for an operation to occur every time a particular request is made, to perform one operation on other requests in the web application, and to allow one operation to be turned off at deployment. The filter API interface can be found in Java x.servlet package. A filter is an interface used to filter tasks on the request to a resource, a servlet or static content, on the response from a resource, or both. It has three methods as part of its life cycle: public void init, do filter, and destroy. Filters are configured in deployment descriptor of a web application. So here you see the initial HTTP request hitting the servlet container. The request object is created, and before it reaches the servlet that exists inside the servlet container, the filter can be configured to execute. So the filter executes and then passes the request object to the servlet. This is called the pre-processing stage of the filter. The moment the filter responds with the data, this is called the moment the servlet responds with the data, the filter again processes that data, and this is called the post-processing step of the filter. So you can do pre-processing or post-processing before the request hits the servlet, or after the request is returned by the servlet and before it reaches back to the servlet container and then is sent out as a HTTP response. There are different types of filters: the request filter, which contains prerequisite processing logic; the response filter, which can be set as a post-response generation logic; and a request response filter that contains both pre-request and post-request processing. This is how we declare a filter in the web.xml file, and this is how we map a filter in our web.xml file. To write a filter program, we create a Java class to implement filter interface that has following methods: init, it is called once when the container instantiates a filter; do filter, it is called for every request intercepted by the filter; destroy, before the web container removes a filter instance from service, the destroy method is called; and we create one web.xml file to configure the filter. If multiple filters are configured for servlets, they are executed in the same order in which they are defined in the web.xml. So here we have the HTTP request, the servlet container, the request object is created, one filter is set up as a pre-filter processing, then the second filter picks up the request, finally the post filter, and the data is received by the servlet. The response object again goes through the same set of filters, and finally the HTTP response is sent out to the client. This is called as filter chaining, where multiple filters can be set up one after the other and they will execute in the order that they are defined. Let's look at a demo on filters so we understand the concept better. We'll go back to Eclipse and we'll run through a quick summary of what we discussed. A filter can be applied on any servlet or JSP page. The filter can be written either as a pre-processing logic before the request goes to the servlet, and it helps in reducing the load on the servlet or JSP page. It implements the interceptor pattern, which is one of the creational patterns part of the Gang of 4 or GOF design patterns. It is also useful to apply validations and check for the proper URL. If the user tries to ping the servlet without valid data, all such requests can be blocked at the filter level itself. They are generally used for validation purpose and intercepting of the incoming request. Filters can also read the data from JSP or HTML pages and create the object that can be shared with the servlet. The load on the servlet can dynamically and drastically reduce, and servlets can simply take that ready-made object that is created based on the data entered by the user in the UI screens and save it into the database. So we'll set up a new project to explain this and look at how to work with it. So a new dynamic web project, we'll name it as filter demo, set the version to 2.5 so we can create a web XML file and finish. Now filters also have a life cycle like a servlet. So filters, as we saw, they have three life cycle methods: init, service and destroy. That's what we saw as part of the servlet. Now a filter, we saw in the slides that it has init, do filter and destroy methods as part of its life cycle. Similar to the init, service and destroy that the servlet has, a filter would have init, do filter and destroy. Filter can also be connected with another filter which is called filter chaining, and the filters will be executed in the same order that they are created. So to explore this, we will create a new HTML file. Let's call it index.html. We'll add a form, action equal to, and we'll connect to register servlet and method equal to post. Here we say enter PAN number, input type equal to text, name equal to PAN, and input type equal to submit, value equal to validate. We'll save this. We'll create a new package, call it com, add a new servlet, register servlet, that's what our form was hosting to, and we are only interested in setting up the service method. In the service method, we'll create an object of print writer out equal to response.get writer. We'll add the relevant package and we'll say out.print, and let us say h4 PAN number plus request dot get attribute, and we'll say PAN, and we'll say plus validated successfully. Okay, and we will close on h4. Make this validated successfully. So here we have set up a filter, and you can see it extends. So rather, we have set up a servlet with a simple output method which says print. It just says the PAN number. We get the attribute PAN, and we simply print a value which says updated successfully. Now to do the validation for the PAN number field, let's add a new package. We'll call it filters, and to reduce the load, as we discussed on the servlet, we will add a filter. We'll call it validation filter. We'll select the validation filter, click on the edit button, pick a servlet. The register servlet is going to be connected to this filter. We'll select that, go next and finish. So if you view the web config file, the configuration for the filter would automatically be added as the filter mapping. Now let's come to our validation filter. So here you see the three methods. It implements the filter interface. It has the destroy, do filter method and the init, which is part of the life cycle of a filter. Let's go to the do filter method. So here we see a method called as chain.doFilter, and this will call the next servlet in the chain once this filter has executed its doFilter method. So let's add our code here. We'll say string pan equal to request dot get parameter, and we will trap the value entered in the pan number text box. If the pan is null, or if the pan does not match, so we will give a match here, and we'll write a regex expression that the pan number should be having 4 digits so it should have 4 digits followed by okay, so let's say let's make it 5 alphabets. So it will start with 5 alphabets followed by 4 numeric numbers, and at the end of that it should have another 1 alphabet. So 5 alphabets, 4 digits, 1 alphabet. That's going to be the format that we are going to validate for, and this will be a pre-validation step before the servlet is hit, because we said a filter takes off the processing load of the servlet and does a pre-processing. So print writer out equal to response dot get writer request dot get request dispatcher index.html. So we are asking for a reference dot, and we call the include method. We've covered that. We pass the request and the response. We'll add the package java.io for the print writer. So if the validation is fine, we then include index.html as the current response, and we also want to print a message within a span tag, and we'll say style equal to color single quote color red, close the span tag and say invalid pan number close span. Okay, so that's the error message. Now in the else part we will, so if it's a successful validation, the else condition will move to the next servlet in the sequence and call it, and we will also do request.setAttribute pan so we'll store the pan value in the session. Okay, and the data that we stored inside the session object here by saying set attribute will be retrieved in the register servlet, because we are saying get attribute pan. So the pan number will be displayed successfully. Let's print some messages here. So we'll say hi from filter, and in the register servlet we'll say hello from servlet, just so that we are able to get the right sequence outputted and you would come to know what is executed. And once we print the message, we'll say pi from servlet, copy this, go to the filter, and in the else, if all is well, we'll say pi from filter. We'll go to our index.html and execute. We just need the filter demo to run, so we'll restart our server. So it says enter PAN number. We just click on validate and it says hi from the filter. So you see the filter was hit and it validated and said invalid PAN number. Look at the URL. This was because of an include. It included the current index.html and the return value of the processed servlet. Okay, and now if I enter junk data, doesn't work, still says invalid. Let's add a proper value, digits, alphabets, 5 alphabets, 4 digits and 1 alphabet, and it says yes, PAN number validated successfully. You see it started with a hi from the filter, it went to the servlet, finished the servlet processing and came back to the filter and successfully printed the PAN value. So that shows us how do we actually implement filters with servlets. So the key takeaways of this session: a web application can remember or use the data of a previous request during the processing of current request, and it's hence called a stateful web application. Session management is a mechanism used by the web container to store session information for a particular user. The hidden form field, URL writing, cookies and HTTP sessions are type of session management. To be notified of events, a custom class that implements the correct listener interface needs to be coded and the listener class needs to be deployed